Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our program. We are very, very glad to have you guys joining us. We've been working through a really good program for all of you today on Sarasota County zoning. I just want to do a little bit of housekeeping this morning and state our mission and objectives, to thank our sponsors. Our mission is to be the leader in our marketplace by promoting professionalism to our membership through education, communications, and business development. Our objectives are to unite those engaged in commercial real estate activities of the real estate profession for the purpose of exerting a beneficial influence on matters affecting the profession and related interests, to promote and stimulate commercial real estate business activity among our CREA members, and to provide our CREA members the opportunity to better serve the public through formal and informal education in commercial real estate on a continuing basis, much like we're doing today. We'll want to take just a moment and thank our gold sponsors, Berlin Pat Nebling, Sable Palm Bank, and South State Bank, as well as our silver sponsors, Atlas Insurance, Chase, Kimley Horn, Shoemaker, Luke and Kendrick, and Synovus, as well as our bronze sponsors, Recording in progress. Achieva Bank, First Horizon Bank, Gulfside Bank, and Lakewood Ranch Commercial. As another matter of housekeeping, for everybody that is on today's Zoom call, just do us the courtesy of making sure to hit your mute button. So in case the dogs bark, which mine are sure to bark at some point during this presentation, or our phones go off, that it doesn't interrupt anything. Also, since we are in a Zoom format today, we normally have our normal question and answer session at the end. So I'm sure we're all familiar with Zoom at this point. So I would ask that if you've got any questions on today's presentation for James, go ahead and put them in the chat bar as the presentation is happening. We will let those questions basically accrue during James's presentation, and when he is complete, James can go through each of those questions one by one and answer. And of course, at the end of the presentation, if you want to throw in an additional question as well, we'll keep our questions all kind of relegated to the end. Really want to consistently thank our board of directors for always working so hard for all of our programming and functions, as well as our program committee. Today was put together chiefly by Melissa Harris, Sarah Lynn Doyle, and William Wilson. And make note that our next meeting will be on August the 23rd. It will also be Zoom because today's meeting is going to focus specifically on Sarasota County, and next month we'll focus on Manatee County. Those are my counterparts who do business north of the University Parkway are probably pretty familiar that Manatee County switched over to a new GIS mapping system a while ago. I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to learning the wheels of that because it's definitely a new operating system. So make sure to mark your calendars for that one as well. And with that, as we get ready to turn everything over to James, I'll just quickly read his bio to you so that you can get familiar with him. And we'll hand the controls over to him. James Ehrman is an AICP accredited planner with 8 years of planning experience and president of the Gulf Coast chapter of the Florida Planning and Zoning Association. James has worked on a variety of planning and zoning projects, including the writing of multiple zoning ordinances and land development codes. Originally from the Rust Belt of Western Buffalo, New York, his interest in planning began at a young age. Growing up in a city filled with historic planning excellence, but struggling to redefine itself in a post-industrial age, he took a great interest in planning as a means to make his home a better place. He is a graduate of the State University of New York, receiving his undergraduate degree in economics and political science in 2010, a master's degree in urban planning in 2012, and a graduate certificate in public management in 2015. James relocated to Sarasota in 2016 and has since had experience in both the public and private sector, with experience in land planning, entitlements, zoning, land development codes, CRA master plans, and comprehensive planning. So please join us today for an informative overview of how zoning works in Sarasota County. Well, James will dive into components of the Sarasota County Unified Development Code, including zoning districts, GIS mapping, and a live demonstration of Sarasota County's online zoning map. James, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll turn the floor over to you, sir.
Thanks, Ben, for that great introduction. As Ben said, my name is James Zerman. I work for Sarasota County Planning and Development Services. Happy to be here this morning. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get going on my prepared PowerPoint presentation. We'll go ahead and get that bad boy loaded up here. So thanks for attending this morning. It's going to be a great morning. I'm definitely excited to walk you through some of the ins and outs about zoning here in Sarasota County, as well as do a live presentation of our mapping software that we offer online, which I'm happy to report is fairly easy to use and pretty intuitive. So it's something that anyone can really pick up. It is a tool that we offer the public to use, as well as our internal resources at the county. So everyone's using the same tool, which is always great. So today's presentation, let's zone out, presentation about zoning here in Sarasota County. As Ben said, just a quick little overview, and I won't beat this to death too much, but I've been around town for about 6 years now, have about 8 years planning experience, an AICP accredited planner. So definitely have worked for the public side and the private side as well. So definitely understand kind of the needs and wants of realtors, of developers, of anyone who might be interested in development overall here in Sarasota County. So it's always good to kind of understand the wants and needs of our constituents and our different applicants and people that we work with on a day-to-day basis. Today's agenda, I really just wanted to run through a quick overview. What's zoning? What's a UDC? You hear this term thrown around in the county. What does that even mean? What's a zoning district? How do we use the county GIS that we offer online? Are there any other useful tools that a realtor or a local developer might be interested in using? And then, of course, a question and answer. It's zoned this, but maybe we can change that zoning. So those are all kind of the three different things that we look at there. Zoning's real fundamental purpose is really to protect a community's health and welfare. It was developed really in the early 20th century as a response to different factors at play, factories moving close to homes, making sure everyone's health and welfare was protected. But really, it's just a set of land use regulations that classify how land can be used, where those uses can take place, and then as well as providing mechanisms to mitigate any type of incompatibilities. So typically zoning is going to cover anything from height and size of buildings, density, which is how many dwelling units can be placed on a property, looking at setbacks of a building, landscaping, parking, all those really fundamental portions that you are concerned about whenever you see a new development go in. How is that going to fit into the neighbors? How is that going to be, a great part of the community, not be something that's a detriment? The county zoning system has really been around since 1955. That was really the first zoning ordinance that took effect in Sarasota County, and it's been updated several times, including 1960, 1975, 1989, 2003, and 2018. Those are all pretty fundamental big changes in the code, and those are all different times where the zoning code may have changed and uses may have changed. And we can dive a little bit more into that if anyone has particular questions about how that all works. But those are some of the key update dates that we like to let people know. Around those times, zoning did change, and some of the rules may have changed as well. The most recent version of the zoning ordinance adopted in 2018 in Sarasota County is referred to as the Unified Development Code. And I've linked that in there. You will see some hyperlinks throughout, and I'm very happy to share this PowerPoint with anyone who would like it after the fact. And those will give you direct links to all those different documents that I refer to in the presentation today. Really what this does is the Unified Development Code basically combined our zoning ordinance and the land development regulations into one book to make it a lot easier to read through and maneuver as you try to figure out the rules and requirements for different things here at the county. This is a living code. It's something that's constantly updated via text amendments by both staff and by the private sector. So it is something that people can request to change, and that we ultimately kind of go through those requests, and anything is approved by the Board of County Commissioners in a public hearing setting if those rule changes make sense for the community. So that's something that I just wanted to point out too. It's kind of a living document that we change as we see fit to respond to those market needs. There's a lot of different zoning districts in Sarasota County. This is a really quick overview of all the different ones. And don't worry, there won't be a pop quiz on these afterwards. But as you can see, they really kind of range from residential districts to commercial, to planned development, all the way down to special districts and kind of special purpose overlay districts as well, that are really just intended for particular areas in the county. A common one you may see a lot is the Siesta Key Overlay District, of the Main Street Overlay District down in Englewood. These are all different, really particular sets of rules and regulations that the county has created to kind of meet the needs of a very particular area with particular needs. So as we go through that today, we'll kind of talk about some of those different base districts and some of those overlays and how that all kind of comes together to form new rules and regulations in parts of the county. So now that we have a little background out of the way about zoning districts here in the county, I wanted to go ahead and kind of jump into looking at the county map. Just a couple of housekeeping items as we look at that, just to kind of point out a couple of the basic controls, and then we'll go ahead and do a live demonstration. So as a reminder, as I'm sure you all know, as you're doing business in Sarasota County, there are 4 different other municipalities located within the county itself. Of course, there's the town of Longboat Key, which has its own rules and regulations, its own zoning code. Same thing for the city of Sarasota, which has a very different zoning ordinance. The city of Venice, which is currently updating its zoning regulations. So that's something definitely to keep an eye on as that goes through the process. And the city of Sarasota, which has also updated its regulations recently. The GIS splash page for Sarasota County is located online. This is kind of what you get when you bring up our Explore Interactive Maps portion on the website. And I'm going to access that today live so you can all see how that works and where that's located. And really the one that you want to be most kind of paid most attention to that we're going to use today is that Planning Data Explorer. And that's really the zoning map that's offered online. It's going to offer you, images of future land use about whether it's zoned this, but what could be rezoned to in the future. It'll show you any special exceptions on a site, which is super useful as you look at a piece of property, so you can know what you can and can't do there. That's really going to be the key map that we're gonna look at today. And once again, this is just a picture of that zoning map. Once you load it up, you'll see the outline of the county, a lot of different colors. What does it mean? What we do is when we jump on that tool itself, there's a stack in the right top corner called the layer list. And that's going to be kind of the different options you can turn on and off to take a look at what those different options are. And the map's interactive, so it turns those layers on and off, and they kind of stack on top of each other as you go through it. And for example, then when we look at a particular address here along Palmer Boulevard, we can see, okay, I see a lot of different colors going on. And when you look at the county zoning, it'll give you a drop-down list of all the different colors and what they mean. So we can see that purple or pink area, those are industrial districts. And we can see that on the map tool itself. So those are just a couple quick little kind of intros to the zoning map. But what we can do also is kind of do a search, and that's a little more advanced. This is something that if you only want to show particular properties, you can. And we'll go into that a little bit today too, but that might be a little more advanced than what we need to go into. But if there's some interest in that, I'm happy to walk us through that today. So what we'll go ahead and load up that live demonstration. I'll go ahead and stop sharing the screen and switch over. So when you go to our website, this is going to be scgov.net. That's the county website. And what we'll be able to do is there's a few different ways to get there. The easiest way to get to the map is you can always go to the A through Z, and this will give you a whole list of the different pages on the county website. What we want to go to is the GIS, the Geographic Information System, and we'll load that up here. And it will take us to a different landing page. And then like I showed on that screen before, it takes you to this landing page of Explore Interactive Maps. And so what we want to go to is go to that Planning Data Explorer. That's the one that we always want to use. And we'll open that up. And that will load up the county tool that we use internally, as well as what you can use externally on the outside. So this is something that anyone can go to anytime. And it'll load up kind of a blank slate here. So one of the definitely things that I always like to do, this will show kind of like a Google Map type view or Apple Maps type view. You just kind of see that blank, there's no imagery. If you go to the bottom left-hand corner here, that'll allow you to load up the different geographies that you might see in the county. So we'll go ahead and load up the imagery. And right off the bat, that's going to give us a better overview about what's going on the ground. And now on that layer list up top that we dropped down before, we can scroll all the way down to county zoning. Now you'll see that our map does offer the different maps for the cities. It will offer county zoning, the map for this city of Sarasota zoning, city of Venice, and the city of Northport. Now, however, I would always recommend if you are working in those municipalities, definitely talk with them as well. Our map is going to be 100% accurate, but the other municipalities, it may not be 100% accurate. So always verify that with them. When we turn on the county zoning, that'll go ahead and start activating all the different colors here that we see in the county. So as I said before, what we can do is we can always click this left arrow here, and that'll give us a drop down of the different list of zoning districts throughout Sarasota County. So this is really going to be your key. You can kind of use this to eye the different multiple zoning districts that we have in the county. Now, what I also wanted to show then is how to do a basic search. So my office, what we can do is in the top left corner, find address or place. Now this will either take a parcel identification number, which in the county, that's always going to start with the number 0. If it starts with a number 2, you're automatically going to be the city of Sarasota. And if it starts with a couple different other numbers, it might be the city of Northport or Venice. But what we can do also is if you don't have a PID, which is the same thing as a tax ID number through the property appraiser's office for a parcel, is we can always type in a physical address. So what we'll do is we'll bring up one of the county buildings here, 1001 Sarasota Center Boulevard. And that'll zoom you right in actually to that particular location. So as we zoom out, we can see, yep, there's our office. It'll show you the color. And we are improving those maps kind of as we go through these things. So typically it will show the zoning district right hovering over it there. And it will show PID. So PID is going to be a planned industrial development. And that's going to be a planned industrial kind of business park type use typically. And a couple other different things that we can turn on and off here. So right off the bat, we see the zoning, we see an aerial of the property. That's great, super helpful, right? We do link into the property appraiser as well, and that's going to give you a lot of really great information. So when we click on the parcel box, boom, right off the bat, we have all the parcel lines drawn here, which will show you the approximate property lines of all these different properties. So these are pretty accurate. Now, they're not necessarily accurate to a degree of something like a survey, but it does give you an idea or a feel about where property lines lie for a district. And now you'll notice when I click on this again, it's going to show me the parcel ID, and it's going to give us kind of this arrow here. Now, what that does is that's going to start going through the different layers that we've loaded. So this is the parcel layer. And when we click on this, it'll show us the zoning. Now, as we add more layers, instead of 1 of 2 or 2 of 2, this might start saying 1 of 6, 1 of 7. Those are all different kind of layers that we have on that map. And each layer is going to kind of be a different piece of information. So what I mean by that is if we go up to some of these different layers that we have here, closed petitions is a really important one that I always recommend you take a look at. When we click on that, that's going to load up any previously approved rezones or special exceptions on the site, which is going to be really important information when we look at what we can and can't do, at a particular property. So when I click back on that, you'll see I turned on the closed petition layer. We've gone from 1 of 2 to 1 of 3, and we can see it brings up petition 00-12. So just glancing at it, now I can tell, okay, this property is zoned PID, planned industrial. And it also has some sort of petition on it, 00-12. We can get even more detail. So if we go and click this button, that's going to load up the rezone petition. It's going to show us, here's the number, here's the rezone petition, and an applicant name. Now, this was never approved. This is something that was applied for but withdrawn. So it was never formally adopted, so we don't have to necessarily worry about it at that location. But if we did something like this one, let's try this. This has a petition 1493. Let's see if that was adopted to kind of show you this, how it works. So this was a special exception now, petition 1493. So special exceptions and rezones go through the same process at the county. Both require a hearing in front of the Planning Commission, as well as a hearing and approval by the County Board of Commissioners. So a rezone, what that's going to do is that changes the zoning district of a property, say from residential to commercial, something like that. And a special exception is going to be a use that typically would not be allowed on that parcel without this special level of approval. What we can do then is, if we want to know what's going on here, if we're lucky, oftentimes we load these right directly onto the GIS system. So if we hit that archive rezone documents button right here, it'll load up a tab, which is the attachment, and this is the actual document for the special exception. So this is definitely kind of a huge thing if you're not aware of this functionality, because if you don't have this, or if you don't know about this and you need a copy of that special exception, you'll need to reach out to the county. And typically we're pretty quick. We usually respond within a day. But it might take the staff time to locate that, load it up, respond to your comment, and get back to you with that attachment. And this will cut down on that time and save you a lot of time if it's available online. So we load that up. This will actually load up the exact document that the board approved for that location. Now, if you've never really read through one of these, they're not necessarily the most exciting thing in the world to read through. There's going to be a lot of kind of stuff up front that talks about, this is the property as described, it's been signed and approved, on this date. And then it'll say, basically, the findings of fact were all positive. This is not going to be a detriment to the community, and we believe it's a good addition. But the most important stuff you'll want to go to is typically at the bottom, and that's going to tell you any type of additional stipulations that special exception is placed upon the property. Now, these are something that are often placed either by the applicant themselves when they go through that special exception process, or it's going to be something that the board or county staff has placed on the property to kind of safeguard it, because maybe it's a use that has a lot of different external incompatibilities with the neighboring property. And these are things, special rules that they've placed on the property to make sure that it's going to fit inside the community better. So when we read through some of those, this special exception, as all special exceptions do, come with a binding development concept plan. So any development in the future has to take place in accordance with that binding plan. It also makes a note to say, a gas distribution center shall be consistent with all the different sections of the zoning code, and that it's subject to the corporation having the capacity to serve the project. So there's a couple of specific rules there. And some of these petitions, when you look at them, can have anything. Some are pretty simple, and some can have upwards of 20, 30, 40 stipulations placed on it. So it definitely gets very, very detailed. And my recommendation always is, if you have questions about the stipulations, what they mean, reach out to zoning staff, reach out to our planning department, and we can walk you through those, because they do get pretty detailed, and there can be potential quote unquote deal killers for a project if they can't meet those stipulations. They might have to go back to the board and amend that special exception, and that can take sometimes anywhere upwards of 6 months to a year, depending on how busy the county is and how many different petitions are already in the queue. So it's definitely something to look out for. And like I said, it comes with this binding development concept plan, which is copied and included in the record for that. So that was a whole lot of information, and we'll go back through that a little bit, but just wanted to show you some of the ins and outs that we see typically for that. So if we go back then to the map, we back out. There's a couple other definitely features that I wanted to get into this afternoon. As I said, closed petitions, that's a really important one. Let's go somewhere else here. Let's go out, and we can zoom out kind of throughout this map, and you can get a good overview about all the different things going on in the county. Let's see kind of an area where we might have a whole lot of growth right now. If you're familiar with the interchange of Fruitville and I-75, there's a lot of new development going on over there. And there are a couple different kind of interesting factors at play there. What I mean by that is not only do you have some zoning districts here, if we click on that, we can see that these are all zoned PED, which is a planned economic development district. But there's also going to be a few different things like closed petitions. It may be part of something called a critical area plan, which is another overlay that the planning department works with the community to develop these plans, so we can turn that one on. It may be part of, we do have overlay districts, and we can always turn those on as we take a look. And we'll get into the future land use a little bit on another property. I don't want to get too confusing all at once, but let's say right here, as you cross the 75 going on Fruitville, you've seen some new apartments going up, you've seen some new retail going up, and now those are all part of that planned economic development district. And those come with a variety of different rezones throughout the last few years here. But for example, that petition 2102, we can load that up, and this will tell us, yep, so this was rezoned. It was rezoned by Menderson Development at that date. It'll tell us when it was rezoned, and it gives us a quick overview of what that rezone did. And we can always jump into that document itself if it's available online to kind of see what was done and what those master plans might look like that are attached to this, which this one didn't really update the master plan. It updated some square footage allotments for different uses there. But that's another really good just tool to know about, tool to use, to take a look at. So let's turn off a couple of these things just to be very simple. Maybe look at another hypothetical situation here, and we'll kind of back out a little bit. One of the most common questions we might get, and one of the common question that you might get from a customer might be, hey, I'm looking at a piece of property, it's zoned residential. I really want to do something commercial there. Can you tell me, what can I do? What is required by code? And kind of like what are we looking at overall? What are the steps I need to take? So for example, if we're kind of in the Bee Ridge area here, let's say we're here, yellow and orange on the map generally is going to be all residential zoning. And if we click on it, yep, I can see, cool, this is RSF1. So that's zoned residential. But what if I have a client maybe at the corner of Bee Ridge and hypothetically whatever street this is, they want to do maybe like a small convenience store or something like that? What would I have to do to change that? What that's going to entail is that the county is going to look at the zoning map of what it is now, and ultimately what controls what can be there in the future is the comprehensive plan, future land use maps. So on this tool, we can also see that when we activate the future land use, that's going to load up what the comprehensive plan states is the intended future uses of those properties. So while it may be zoned something today, over time, the comprehensive plan sees that changing to a different use, and the applicant would have to go through a rezone to get there. So if we click on that, we can see that now not only does it show me the zoning, which is OUE1 at this corner, which is an open use estate zoning, which is typically a larger 5-acre lot type single family home site. And the future land use is going to be MODR, which is moderate density residential. Now, if we click on that, well, James, what does that mean? It's going to give us a little bit of a hint here. It's going to tell us, well, the future land use code is MODR. which, yep, there it is, moderate density residential. And what this is going to provide then is it's still going to be residential in the future. So it's not something that an applicant can change to commercial without going through an additional step. And we'll talk about that. And in the future, while right now it only allows for 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres of land, it could in future, if you wanted to rezone to something more dense, like a residential single family site, you could rezone that site to something that is greater than 2 dwelling units an acre, but less than 5 dwelling units per acre. So it is something where if you had a kind of a land developer or someone looking to put more homes there, they could potentially rezone that property and go through that rezone process to something more dense at that location. Now, let's say that you have an applicant though, hey, that's great, but I really want to go commercial there. What else does that entail? Well, it's going to entail a rezone to something commercial. So you have to go through that same 6-month to 1 year process to rezone it. But the comprehensive plan future land use map is not going to give you an easy way to do that because it's not stated to be commercial in the future. So what that's going to entail is a comprehensive plan amendment to change the future land use map. So this is a kind of another level of review that the county has to do. And oftentimes, depending on the size of that comprehensive plan amendment, it might be something that requires state review and state approval as well. So there's a lot of interesting intricacies when we start going through that, and there's some different level of analysis and review that goes through it. But what we like to say is nothing is necessarily impossible. It just requires that the applicant would have to definitely have some sort of engineer or planning agency, planning firm to kind of help them through that process to develop maps, develop analysis, do traffic counts, things like that. To do a comprehensive plan amendment to make sure it's going to meet all of our criteria. And then that comprehensive plan amendment and rezone amendment would be packaged up together. And they kind of ride that process together then through neighborhood workshops, through a planning commission hearing, and then through the county board of county commissioners in some sort of final approval process. So there's definitely a fair amount that goes with that. It's a little beyond probably the scope of a realtor. It's something that obviously that's what we're here for, to help out with. So if you have those questions of saying, hey, James, this is what we're looking at. This is really what my client wants to do. Can you tell me the steps to get there? And definitely that's what we're here for. We're here to help you get through that process to make sure you can relay to your client that information of, hey, these are the steps. It's not impossible. It's going to be a timely process, and there's some application fees for sure to do that. But if you're serious about it, and if this is the right spot, then you can go through that process to request those changes. I also, though, like to say that nothing's guaranteed. We definitely can't give you a magic crystal ball of saying, hey, yep, nope, I don't think anyone's going to have an issue with this. And, oh, no, yep, this makes sense. There's no guarantees, unfortunately, for that. And sometimes things do get denied. And if there were application fees paid, those already are kind of been used to do the reviews and whatnot. So it is something that we'll walk you through that process. We'll tell you, we don't really tell you what your chances are, as we are not the decision makers. The decision makers are going to be the board of county commissioners, and they make those decisions based upon multiple different factors and whatnot. So that's just something I like to point out when we talk about that. So maybe pausing here real quick. That's a lot of information. I do have a few additional slides at the end that we can end on, but being in the zoning map might be a good time to kind of dive into some of the questions that we have in the chat. And so I'm happy to start taking some of those questions. So let's jump in. So Bruce, you asked just most recently, well, actually we'll go back in order here. Marcia Cutler, you asked, what are the steps to getting a special exception in Sarasota County? And Marcia, that's a great question. And let me load up a quick handout that we have, and I'm happy to send this to you after the fact here. And we can definitely share this with everyone in the room. And this is something available online as well. And this is actually what we typically hand out to anyone who's interested in what is entailed for a special exception or a rezone. So this is a handout, and it's kind of going to go through the planning services, rezone and special exception process. Now, this is something that the planning division does. This is pretty much kind of their bread and butter. They go through this process every day with people. Essentially, it's multi-stepped. If you have a question about a rezone or a special exception use, we'll go ahead and you have to reach out to our planning staff. And their email is going to be planner@scgov.net. And I've included that link at the end of this presentation. You have a kind of an informal chat with the planning team and say, hey, this is what we're thinking. This is what we'd like to do. And they'll more or less give you some pointers of, hey, yep, okay, this is something we've seen before. This is what you'll need to do, fill out this application. And the next step after that informal meeting is actually going through a pre-application meeting with our DRC, which is our Development Review Coordination Group. So this is a super, super useful thing that if you have a client that's kind of on the fence about whether or not they want to look at rezoning something, maybe they're not sure what all the steps might be, this is a super, super useful process. It's a $350 fee, but it's such a good investment to know if there's any potential quote unquote deal killers or red flags about a piece of property. Because what this does is it allows the applicant to submit kind of a quick narrative and maybe a quick concept plan of, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Can the county tell me what should I be worried about? What should I look out for? And the DRC typically has anywhere from 15 to 18 different members from the different disciplines at the county. So you might be able to get, you will be able to get comments from not only planning and zoning staff, but you'll get comments from stormwater, environmental protection, historical resources, utilities, any of those really key components about what you need to kind of consider when developing a piece of property. They'll give you all the information about that site, about anything that you need to be made aware of. So that is a super, super useful process that I always recommend. If someone has serious consideration about investing in a piece of property, go through this process first, know what you're dealing with, know what type of investment you need to make that property do what you want to do in the future. And that's a super, super useful process. And it is required if you're doing a rezone or special exception, you're going to have to do this anyways. So that's just something to be aware of. After you go through that DRC process, the applicant then will kind of know whether or not they want to go for it per se. And that's really when you get kind of some of the key steps kicking off here. It will require a neighborhood workshop. So you have to meet with the neighbors, tell them about the plan. And then ultimately, once you go through those key first steps, you can go ahead, complete all the application materials and submit that application. So in the county, it's going to be a $7,500 fee to go through that special exception and rezone process. And that is used kind of as the way that staff bills its time and whatnot and goes through that process. There's a couple different levels of review. There's completeness or sufficiency and formal review. And those reviews typically involve 10-day and a 5-day formal. But if there's any inconsistencies or errors with the application, which, we all like to obviously try to get it right the first time, but oftentimes there's just things that are overlooked or the applicant wasn't aware or they made a mistake and they have to kind of go ahead and do corrections. This is where we spend a little bit of time going back and forth with an applicant to make sure everything looks right. Everything meets code and is going to go ahead and be ready to go forward on in the process to those actual hearings. So the first hearing is going to be with the Planning Commission, which is an advisory board that meets downtown in our chambers at 1660 Ringling Boulevard. They'll go ahead and make a recommendation of either approval or denial. But once again, it is a recommendation. They're an advisory board. And then they forward all of their findings and recommendations to the county commission. And they are ultimately who decides on any sort of quasi-judicial rezone or special exception based upon findings of fact, based upon neighbor testimonies, and based upon staff review and analysis of the property. And then they'll typically go ahead and make that decision. So we've said anything from typically 6 to 7 months. We're very, very busy right now. It's a very busy time. So that can definitely stretch out to maybe up to a year if it takes a while to get through the review process. That's just something to be made aware of for your clients if they want to go through that process. They're looking at a fair amount of time, and there is some money involved to go through that. And I'm happy to forward that out to Marcia and anyone else who would like that on the call today. But that's really the steps of getting it, and you can always share that with your customer or client as well. So Bruce, you had asked at 9:05, what is the zoning of the Bee Ridge and Lorraine area for the red? I believe that was a residential area, but a commercial area. Let's take a look there. So Bee Ridge and Lorraine, we're still at that point. The future land use is commercial. And the current zoning is actually CN, which is commercial neighborhood. And so those are typically lower intensity levels of commercial uses, maybe things like small convenience stores, small shops. And if we click on that, another cool trick that we can do, Bruce, actually is if you kind of bring up that parcel ID number, like I showed before, if we click on that, it'll actually link us right to the property appraiser and show us a bunch of different information right off the bat. It'll show you valuations of the property. It'll show you square footages. And if we even click on that property detail page, it'll jump us to the actual property appraiser website itself. And we can see, who owns it, ownership group, the building square footages, when they were built, what's on the site. And this is all information that the property appraiser goes through when they look at a property as part of the assessment process for taxes and whatnot. And it'll even show you the most recent changing of hands or instrument numbers with the deeds for ownership. And you can even click on those, and that'll take you to the Sarasota Clerk of Courts website to look up some of that information. So that's a super, super useful trick if you weren't aware of it. This will give you a whole lot of information when you guys are looking at, what to list a property for. And I'm sure you have your own methods and whatnot, but this is a super good tool to see everything that's going on that site real easily, real fast. So great question, Bruce. Deborah had a really good question. Group homes in a residential single family zone. So that's a great question. We get a lot of inquiries on that. Group homes often, it very much depends on the use, I'll say. So our code's going to do a couple different things. And one of them will be, it categorizes things such as group living, which is really kind of more like assisted living facilities or independent living facilities, things like that. But there also are a lot of different state definitions for group homes, whether it's for, people that are elderly being taken care of in a group home environment, or maybe they're developmentally have some, different challenges and whatnot, and they do that. So there's kind of different things that county staff looks at. And then there's also things kind of like halfway homes, which we all often hear about as well. So typically the short answer, Deborah, is yes, group homes can be placed in a residential single family zone, but it very much depends on the exact nature of the use. And so my recommendation would be to reach out to us directly. zoning@scgov.net is our email address. And that's going to be at the end of my presentation as well. And we can always kind of get in touch with you and say, hey, yep, maybe just tell us a little bit more information about what's going on. And we'll give you the exact details of, where this could be placed and things that might be needed in terms of additional licenses or approval. So good question, a complicated answer. So if you ever have, a particular property you're looking at, please let me know or let zoning staff know. We're happy to walk you through that. So Lisa, you said, where on the site can you find this resource? And does the city of Sarasota have a similar resource? I believe the city does. And I kind of showed the steps earlier, but if you go to scgov.net and when you load up A through Z and you load up the G, that'll get you to geographic information systems. That's kind of an alphabetized version of what's on the site. And that'll get you to what you want to get into, which is the Planning Data Explorer. And that's going to be this map that you've seen us kind of use throughout the presentation. And those first couple of steps are going to be in my PowerPoint slides as well, which I'm happy to forward over to your team. But to answer your question, Lisa, yes, I think the city of Sarasota does have some type of zoning map information. As I also said earlier, we do have a layer in our system. If we turn off all of our stuff here and we go to the city of Sarasota, which also useful, it does show you kind of those city limit lines, because it gets a little complicated when you start getting out past Fruitville of where those city line lies. But you can always feel free to use the Sarasota zoning as a tool. And now this is a copy of the city of Sarasota's map. And this will give you a good idea about the city of Sarasota. But like I said, we do not manage their map. This is not our map. I cannot speak on behalf of the city of Sarasota Properties. I would definitely always recommend reaching out to them themselves. But you can feel free to use this tool on our website as a basis or get an idea, but it may not be 100% accurate. So I always recommend you reach out to the city of Sarasota staff, which completely different team, completely different set of rules that you'll definitely want to touch out or reach out to them with what's going on in the city. But really good question, Lisa. Great, Marcia. Thanks for providing that email. I'll go ahead and give that to you right after the presentation. Awesome. And it looks like, Bruce, you had another great question about ADUs. So an ADU, just for anyone who's not familiar with the acronym, is an accessory dwelling unit. This is a new thing that we've done in the county, which essentially any residential single family lot in the county can now have an accessory dwelling unit by right, which is kind of a huge thing, right? An accessory dwelling unit can be used as kind of like a separate rental or a separate place where someone can live. These are things that can be rented out to people, and then they're intended to be more of a full-time basis. They're not intended to be short-term rentals, but they're really, really cool if you have, if you're an adult and you have your kids out of college coming back home and they need somewhere to live, they can get started in the backyard with an accessory dwelling unit, which is huge. Or let's say you're a parent and you're getting older and you want to age in place, and maybe your kids go ahead and kind of live with you, or you want to live in a smaller area and let your kids take over the front big house. You can do that too with an ADU. So it really does kind of help that quality of life, and also help with affordability of things. As I'm sure you're all aware, it's not getting any cheaper to live in Sarasota County. So, it's something else that the county has looked at and really studied carefully to say, yep, we think this is a great kind of step in affordability and aging in place and letting kids come back and live with their parents after school. So there are some rules about that, though. And what I'll say is that we can send you those rules. But ultimately, if you want to see a copy of those, our code is available online at MuniCode. And I'll load this up just so you can kind of see that, Bruce. And it's hidden here. But if we go into Article 6, which is where we talk about all of our base zoning districts, and 12476 is going to be where we list out all the different zoning districts and all the different permitted uses that you can do by right or by special exception. And I'm going to scroll down here because this is going to be a little bit hidden down here. But just so you can see the language, and I'll send you a copy of this afterwards too. Let's go down a little bit further there. And this is a pretty lengthy section because it's going to go through every zoning district and go through every permitted use and all the different things you have to do for setbacks and things like that. But here we are. So this is going to be the residential single family zoning district permitted uses. So RSF, which is going to be probably the most prominent zoning in the county. There's a lot of RSF. And what that's going to say is it's going to say that, yep, so an accessory dwelling unit is permitted subject to the following. And so there are some different rules and regulations for an accessory dwelling unit. The key one typically is that it's a maximum of 750 square feet in area, and that's really going to be the entire ADU itself. So that's something to to be aware of it. It is small. It's kind of like the size of a single family bedroom apartment. But it is something that we're offering that anyone can do by right. You don't need any sort of special approvals. You can just go right to the permit office and pull a permit for an accessory dwelling unit and go through that typical process. And what else I have too, Bruce, that I'll send out is there is a zoning FAQ that we have online. And I believe that we include a lot of these kind of common questions. And I'll attach a copy of that to send out after the presentation for everyone, just so you have those, because that's going to be a great thing. Hey, this is from the county itself, right? You can show any customer, any client, and I think they'll probably take that in good regard that they're getting the information straight from the horse's mouth per se. Deborah, you had a great question about Airbnb rentals in RSF. So Airbnb rentals, we would consider those to be short-term rentals. Typically, people are looking to rent it for the weekend or a week or something like that for a vacation. We do not allow Airbnb rentals in single-family zoning districts in the county. The only location that we allow short-term rentals is if a property is zoned multifamily and located on a barrier island. So where you're really going to see that is obviously going to be Siesta Key. If a property is zoned RMF and it's located on a barrier island, including Siesta Key, you can do short-term rentals 1 day, 1 night, 1 week, whatever you want to do. If you're not there, and if you're in an RSF district anywhere in the county, you can only rent a dwelling unit for a period of greater than 30 days. So it really is intended to be something that you're leasing out a home to more of like a full-time renter scenario. So that's really the rule. We get a lot of questions, we get a lot of calls, and there's a lot of, obviously, if you live next to one of those in a single family district and you don't like it, you're going to call the county about it. So it is we often get a lot of calls. Our code enforcement department is always, always busy fielding those inquiries and complaints and whatnot. So that is something that, the rules say you can't do it. If you're going to go ahead and do it, you really put yourself at risk for code enforcement action, including, anything up to fines and going to special magistrate and going through those processes, which are not fun. So always recommend just do what you're supposed to do and you never have to worry about it, right? Diane, you had a great question about tiny homes on an RSF property. So tiny homes are a little tricky, and how we look at them in the county right now is in two different camps, I would say. We'll either consider a tiny home that exists on a permanent foundation to be something like a modular home. A modular home on a permanent foundation, and it can be like a tiny home like that, can go within any type of residential zoning district, including residential single family. If it's a tiny home that exists on wheels or a chassis, so it's movable, we do not consider those to be able to be used as dwelling units in the county. We would categorize those the same way that we categorize like a recreational vehicle. So they're really not intended to be lived in full time. They're really only intended to be used how you would use like an RV, like to go camping, things like that. That's how we look at it now. So whether or not you could put 2 tiny homes on an RSF property, you would ultimately be able to have 1 single family home, which is the main dwelling unit. And then if you wanted to have an accessory dwelling unit, which may be a tiny home that exists on a permanent foundation, you could do that. If the house is also a tiny home, you could do that too. So you could potentially have 2 tiny homes that exist on a permanent foundation on one property. But it wouldn't be something, if I had a single family house, I would not be able to just then also have 2 tiny homes in my backyard. That would be something that we would not allow. So I hope that answers that question. And tiny homes are a little tricky. So if you ever have questions about tiny homes, about things like shipping container homes we've seen in the county, we see all sorts of different questions every day. Feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to tell you what you can and can't do and save, yourself and your client any type of headache or any type of call from the county saying, hey, we see this. Always better to ask. We'll let you know. we're nice. We always try to help you out as best we can. So. And I'm not seeing any other questions right now. So I think what I'll do is, I think we did a great job covering that map today. Hopefully it was, really useful. And I see Ben asking as well. And I'm going to continue just the last few slides here of this. And if there's any questions that pop up before, we'll jump back into it. But this was another just great slide to have. I believed it was Diane that asked about rezones and special exception process. So this is another great handout about that particular process. And you can feel free to use this in any sort of handouts that you do. The one thing we didn't really get too much into, but I mentioned, was critical area plans. So you might see some of these in the county. There's a few. There's a Fruitville Road critical area plan. There's a Venice Avenue, East Venice Avenue overlay plan as well. These are kind of overlays that have additional rules and regulations. So if you ever see these, my recommendation is you can try to read through them if you'd like. A lot of them are pretty lengthy and there's a lot of requirements. You can always feel free to reach out to either the planning staff at the county or the zoning staff. We're happy to walk you through those. One thing that we didn't really get into was that we also do have a utility locator map, and that's going to be in the same website that has the planning data explorer. So these are all right next to each other. I do not use these or use this tool on a day-to-day basis. We do have an entire team for utilities that goes through that, and they can really let you know about where utilities are available. But I believe their map and their locator tool is fairly easy to use, and you can probably load it up and kind of run through it. So that's another really good resource. And I've listed the link here on that webpage as well, so you can feel free to access that. And I think we went through a lot of the questions. I don't think there's anything additional at this time. Thank you so much for joining us today. If there's any questions at the end here, I'm happy to field those. Just some useful links on your page here, zoning@scgov.net. That's going to be the best way to get in touch with someone in the zoning department. Planner@scgov.net if you have questions about a rezone, a special exception, some type of overlay. These are the ladies and gentlemen that are going to be able to really best assist you. The utility questions, this is the best utility email to use if you want to get in touch with someone at utilities real quickly. Or you can always dial 941-861-5000. That's going to be our general county line that they'll be able to connect you with someone to speak with. What I will say is that typically we probably run faster responses on emails. Oftentimes we might be already speaking with a customer, helping someone else out. So if you call us, it might go to voicemail and we'll have to get back to you, through that method, where even if we're on a call and we see an email pop up, we might be able to get back to you faster or multitask and kind of get back to you that way. So I always like to push people to email, but if you like to use the phone, if you're more comfortable that way, that's completely fine. We offer that as well. And that's going to be the best number to get in touch with anyone at the county, and they can connect you to that team right away. As I said, we did have that zoning FAQ that we offer online. So we do have that. You can click there and kind of see it. And we do have a short handout about what is zoning, where I've gotten some of my slides from today. And you can click on that as well. Well, great, Bruce. Yeah, and thanks to everyone so much. I really enjoyed sharing with you today. I hope it was a useful presentation. Maybe you'll learn some new stuff. I'm always available. Anyone at this county is happy to help you out. That's what we're here for. You're our customers, you're our citizens. That's what we're here for a public servant role. And we're always happy to help out where we can. And we'll give you the best answer that we can. And it might not always be the answer you want, but we'll give you the heads up if it's not, and we'll let you know. So thanks so much for attending today. And Ben or anyone else on the team, if you'd like, I can stop sharing and hand over the baton.
Yeah, thank you, James. That was absolutely awesome. You can't hear it because we're on Zoom, but everybody's clapping for you digitally at the moment. Thank you so much for just a really, really informative meeting. Anyone who has any questions that they forgot, or obviously maybe it'll pop up to you at lunchtime today and you wish you would have asked, just let us know and we can get that question over to James as well. For those of you that asked earlier, yes, we will be providing today's meeting materials to you via email later so that you can have all of the attachments and websites and phone numbers as well. So again, thank you guys all for coming today. Mark your calendars for our meeting next month, where we will also be reviewing Manatee County planning and zoning and GIS. And other than that, I wish you all a wonderful and productive day, and we will see you out in the field for the next deal. Have a great day, everybody.